President Biden heads to South Carolina after two historic wins, becoming the first Republican candidate since 1976 to win both New Hampshire and Iowa.
Joe Biden skipped New Hampshire altogether, but still won thanks to voters writing his name down. So now the media thinks Joe should, just stay in that basement until November.
For him to win a write-in effort like this, where the Biden campaign was not on the ground, they were not organizing, is quite a statement.
If I were Biden, I would stay hidden, and I'll tell you why. He doesn't inspire confidence.
So this is a very bad night for Donald Trump, looking at the pattern.
Nikki Haley beat Donald Trump among independents. That is not a good sign for a former president of the United States.
People writing in the president's name in a contest in which he was not formally competing, it is awkward. And some of that awkwardness is about to get way worse.
A lot of weird to break down there. Joe Concha is a Fox News contributor and columnist for The Messenger. And he joins us now. Joe, your reaction to all of it.
Okay, first, let's do the Republican side, Todd. Take the names out of this, because I think it clouds judgment anytime Donald Trump is a vote. So what if I told you there was a primary for a presidential nomination, and then I told you that one candidate beat another candidate by 32 points in Iowa and then 11 to 12 points in New Hampshire? But then I tell you that, no, the candidate that got beat by 32 and 12 points in the first two contests, actually, that's the one who's doing really well right now. Look, I'm with Nancy Mace on this. I just don't see a road for Nikki Haley at this point. As Mace pointed out, he's up 30 to 40 points in South Carolina, and that contest isn't for another month. So there will be pressure for Nikki Haley to get out, but it doesn't appear that that's going to be happening, and the show goes on. Meanwhile, as far as Joe Biden, guys, isn't it amazing that a former member of the Obama-Biden administration, Van Jones, believes that a sitting president should hide from the public and the media and not talk about his record for the past 3 years? I mean, talk about a confidence booster. Either way, we know that CNN, MSNBC, they will do everything in their power to help with the basement strategy through what's called the bias of omission. They will almost solely focus on Donald Trump in terms of his legal battles. They won't talk about the crisis that is a catastrophe at the U.S. southern border, that topic that crisis richly deserves. They won't talk about Biden's foreign policy. They won't talk about gas prices rising or the fact that inflation is still 250% higher than it was when Joe Biden took office. And they won't broach Joe Biden's age very much. So they'll be happy to keep him in the basement and not talk about his record and focus on Trump instead, because that's better for ratings and clicks and because they hate the man so much.
Yeah, well, President Biden certainly hid from New Hampshire voters. It was a symbolic race. There were no delegates awarded because he's all eyes on South Carolina. Ended up with 62% of the vote. Do you think, Joe, that margin of victory will silence the people who are calling for an alternative candidate to Joe Biden? A lot of those people also in the media.
I bet you could go out to the street right now, Carly, and ask who challenged Joe Biden in New Hampshire last night. And probably somewhere around 95 to 96 out of 100 could not name Marianne Williamson or Dan Phillips. These are not true competition as far as Joe Biden is concerned. You put Gavin Newsom on a ballot, you put Gretchen Whitmer on a ballot, you put Michelle Obama on a ballot, I have a feeling those numbers would look much different. So look, he's the incumbent. It's the campaign's fault that he wasn't on the ballot. So even though he got 62% of the votes, he's the incumbent. It doesn't matter whether it came through a write-in or not. And as long as Joe Biden stays in this race, obviously he will be the nominee.
Yeah, well, we are in the presidential election now, the primary, but a lot of people are already moving forward towards the general election in their minds. And then when you think about the media coverage, Joe, and what that will look like, at this point, negative media coverage for Donald Trump is just baked into the cake. Do you think that it's really going to have an impact on voters similar to the way it has in the past?
Well, Carly, think about how long this cake has been made, right? Donald Trump declared he was running for president in 2015. We're now 9 years later, and it's been a constant drumbeat of negative attention. Here's what I know. Back in 2016, The Hill, where I used to write for, we looked at all the major endorsements from 59 newspapers throughout the country, and 57 endorsed Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump. And what did that get Hillary Clinton? It got her a set of steak knives and a concession speech. In other words, you could talk about negative media coverage hammering Trump, you're right. It's baked into the cake, and people don't, quite frankly, trust the messenger anymore when it comes to media coverage because they know it's not journalism, it's activism at this point.
Joe, Donald Trump is accused of, denying elections every now and again. Yesterday, Joseph Biden, during his New Hampshire campaign stop in Virginia, referenced the governor as the real governor, Terry McAuliffe, yet I'm listening. I don't hear anything from the mainstream media. Do you expect that we're going to have, investigations into the election denial in Virginia?
Oh, boy. Yeah, I saw that yesterday. The real governor, Terry McAuliffe. That's funny. Glenn Youngkin won quite easily there. You also have the White House press secretary who also called Donald Trump illegitimate after 2016. Hillary Clinton did the same thing. Stacey Abrams. I could go down the line. If Democrats deny elections, then
yes.
Hey, you get a free pass. What can we say?
He won in New Hampshire, no delegates, like we said, but then he got heckled 11 times in Virginia. So I would call that a mixed bag in terms of success rate for him yesterday. Joe, got to leave it there. Have a great day.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.